Not all giant mouses have been tools that you can use. This one is. I can give that approval to the Nazca. This thing is a tool that I can and do use a lot. What's going on, everybody? TheRealSherifM here, aka ManganasSteel, with another knife video for you guys. Today I'm going to do a design review of a brand that I have had a very much love-hate relationship with for the last several years. And if I'm honest, it's been mostly hate, to probably a lot of people's surprise, actually. Today we're talking GiantMouse. And how can I explain? GiantMouse is a brand started by Voxnays and Anzo, and both are really well-renowned designers and makers in their own right. And both of them come from overseas, from Europe, and they bring a very unique sensibility to their designs. Vox is very much celebrated within the American knife making community. He has a very unique take on aesthetics and proportions. Whereas I feel Anzo is a little, or Anzo, I'm not entirely sure which is the correct pronunciation, but I feel he's a little less known, so to speak. But believe it or not, between the two, he is more of my personal preferred designer between the two. If I had to go and buy, let's say, like a knife designed exclusively by one or the other, Anzo would be my go-to. If you've ever seen some of his customs, they are just stunning, absolutely stunning works of art. And he does really, really interesting things with the bolsters and micro milling and so on and so forth that just personally captivates me. But these guys came together like Voltron, and they created this brand and decided to offer a bunch of different knives on the market. I have owned several of them, and I have hated every single one, to be 100% honest. I had a Sonoma, the first generation, and I absolutely hated it because, what do I have here? Oh, here, I'll use my Vero as an example, right? So the Vero has, your usual stuff. With the Sonoma, it has this kind of all blended into a nice curve. But then right here at the end, they had this tip that would just stick out and right into the pinky. And you're using your pinky for a lot of your power in gripping a knife and cutting through cardboard and doing a lot of stuff like processing of waste. And man, that thing created such an insane hotspot in my hand, combined with their absolutely inane and stupid pocket clip design. I'll see if I can throw a picture of it up on the video right now, but it was this crazy 3D mill thing that just looked like they gave no consideration to ergonomics with whatsoever. That combined with a blade whose behind the edge thickness was equivalent to a hinderer, really, really made me kind of hate it, because just for the size and the type of knife it was, it really drove me nuts. And then I think it's the GMF1 in N690. It's their little pocket fixed blade, sheep's foot. Again, it had this little curved around portion that just like dug into my hands. And if you didn't have medium to small size hands for any of their knife designs, basically, just the knives would not work for you under any circumstance. So I sold it. And for a brief moment, I never even shared it because I had a Biblio and I returned it because of the exact same issue. And GiantMouse is actually the brand that made me preach ergonomics, more than any other brand out there that I kind of nitpick. And if you look, really, like a lot of the successful brands do that. They keep these neutral shapes. Yes, it may not be as visually interesting, but it actually like suits the hands. These are just some of what's on my desk right now. Where you need to put pressure, you've got like flat sections that really work. And that's what makes for some of these being very successful knife designs. Not just like Instagram kind of famous knife designs, but actual usable tools that people just don't post for like pictures, but actually continually use. And I believe that if you ask a lot of people why they like the GRAZIOSO, it's because of exactly that. It fits into the hands, there aren't any hot spots, and you can use the knife for a prolonged period of time without having to worry about really anything digging into you under normal use. And the biggest violators for that, for me, being a guy with big, fat American hands, even though I'm not American by blood, or Caucasoid by blood. I mean, I'm half Greek, but Greeks aren't usually known for being big people, but I'm a big person. And yeah, these mitts, they require a different consideration. Now, that I've said my entire piece on all the failings. I mean, really, I've done like, I don't know, like 5-6 minutes now of bitching about GiantMouse. Let's transition into the good. And before I get into that, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'll put links down in the video. If you are interested in getting involved with ManganasSteel going into the future, or you just want to share some of the nice pictures in like a nice community, I have created a Facebook group. The link is also down in the description below. Please join. I'm definitely down for everybody to be involved who is a ManganasSteel knife owner and wants to see where the brand is going in the future. So, enough about me. Let's talk about the GiantMouse knife that completely rewrote my opinions on the brand. That's this guy. The Nazca. Look at this little crazy, beautiful little knife here. M390, micarta full scales, Axis style pivot lock, wire clip here. Really, really interesting sort of aesthetics. So this guy caught my eye very early on when it came on to Blade HQ, and I hesitated for the longest time, and it wasn't until said Stevie, who's a buddy of mine, confirmed for me that, he wears a similar size glove to me, has similar size hands, that this actually fit in his hands well. And the number one part that made me concerned about fitment for this knife is it actually shows up really good here when it's closed. See this little curved point right here? You see that shit? That's what made me worry. That's what almost stopped me from buying this knife. Actually, it did stop me from buying the knife for the longest time, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I complain about. Oh yeah, that shows up real nicely there. This is the kind of stuff I routinely complain about with GiantMouse, right? This has the potential to be an insane little hot spot in your hands if this knife doesn't fit you perfectly. Luckily for me, though, it does. And that made this the first GiantMouse knife that I will keep. And I've been EDCing and really have gotten to enjoy. So, this is the reason why I bitch about this is because, you know, they did this nice curve here, right? Why couldn't they have just connected that to this and made it, you know, a nice simple curve? I don't feel that this little hook is adding anything to the functionality or my ability to retain the knife, in all reality. It just is an aesthetic decision from my perspective that really risks kind of ostracizing some of your target audience because they get this thing, and imagine if it was here, right in the middle of my ring finger. Man, that would be uncomfortable as hell. It really would be. Or let's say it was in the middle of my ring finger. Again, same sort of deal. I would be bearing down, and that thing would literally be creating, I mean, I can put it in my hand and it'll start creating these lines and these points that just are uncomfortable, especially if you're using a tighter grip. So for me, this is kind of what I bitch about when I talk about GiantMouse knives, is decisions like this that from my point of view are largely aesthetic, and it's not preventing the knife from sliding out of my hand in any way, shape, or form. It's just more of, like, again, kind of a stylistic decision. But having said that, this knife surprises. This knife genuinely surprises. If you do have extra large hands and you have been interested in this knife, I will give it a very, very gracious 2 thumbs up. It is the first GiantMouse knife that I have experienced that does have really nice blade geometry, actually. It is not overly thick behind the edge, and the tip comes down to a tremendously thin point. I mean, I've almost had to be careful with this thing because it's thicker than the GRAZIOSO's tip. And I don't pry, but there are a few occasions where I'll use the spine to kind of leverage something. Let's say a pin on my AR, you know, trying just to pop that thing out a little bit, that I've had to worry about the tip, you know, potentially getting damaged. Because it is so thin, which is nice. You know me, and I'm all about piercing and slicing. This is phenomenal for that. There's no question about it. The edge geometry, as I said, comes down fairly thin. The grind is really nice. The thumb studs are also very nice, very usable, great amount of grip. They have this nice stepping to them that I really appreciate. And another thing that I absolutely love about this knife is that, okay, so I am not the biggest fan of axis lock knives. A lot of the reason I'm not a huge fan of axis lock knives is actually the action, right? I have this guy right by me on the desk, and the spring is so soft, you know, that it doesn't require a lot of effort, and it's almost so soft to the point where, like, you could fail the opening every time if you really want to, you know? You really gotta whack it with some authority for the blade to come out, you know? And that's not the case with this GiantMouse Nazca. You put in any sort of effort into that thumb stud, and man, this thing just fires out like a rocket ship. The tuning on this is really great, and I've heard some people complain that it's a little stiff and the tips of these guys are a little bit rounded, but for me, I have no problem. I can access them and just, you know, do this all day. And it's so much, it's what I've always wanted a Benchmade to feel like. And actually, typically from Benchmade, the bug out's my favorite because the blade is not that heavy. When you start getting into the heavier blades with the Benchmade access lock, the spring is so light that it really feels like mushy. When you get into the bug out, the blade is so light that the spring feels much stronger. And so with this guy, I get that feeling, and it feels like a bank vault. And even the fidget timing of when I release the access bar just feels really gratifying and satisfying. And, you know, blade to handle ratio is right where it should be, as closest to that end as possible. Nice little titanium back spacer here with a big lanyard hole. This is very typical Vox design right there, and it works. It works. And thank God for this. Now, normally I don't care for wire spring, you know, pocket clips like this, because the ones that I've had in the past have not been that great. They have been very, very springy, and they've tended to wander a little bit left and right, or up and down, depending on how you're holding the knife. But regardless, they've tended to wander. This guy doesn't. This thing is awesome. It's actually the best example of a wire pocket clip that I've seen thus far. Goes in and out of every pair of pants, from sweatpants to jeans to like Dockers to whatever, dress pants. Actually, I've never really carried this knife with dress pants. It's a little bit on the heavy side. I believe it's right at around 4 ounces. So I tend to prefer to carry something a bit lighter with dress pants. But dude, this thing, I really can't say enough about it. Oh, I forgot to mention, the scales are ever so slightly contoured, which does make this even that much more comfortable in the hand. I mean, even look, the positioning here of this crazy shaped blade ramp right here fits the thumb perfectly. This knife is also exceedingly comfortable in a pinch grip. The very tip here indexes with my finger really, really well, and I can use that really thin tip for some like fine control. Dude, yeah, I've even just with this flat section here, it fits into the palm. I've even done processing of cardboard just like this in a pinch grip. And I never pinch grip knives for cutting down cardboard, but it's just so comfortable, and the control is there. This is the only time where this little guy seems to make sense, actually, is in the pinch grip. That's the only time that I've ever felt that serves a functional purpose, because that does give me an extra spot of retention, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary at all. So, but having said that, the Nazca is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best GiantMouse I've ever handled. And now, I haven't handled the Ace Grand. I've heard really good things about the Ace Grand. And I haven't handled anything other than this guy from the new. Basically, think Ace Grand and newer. I don't think I've handled any of their stuff. And again, it's largely because their stuff has been designed for people with, I feel, medium to small hands in mind. It's not See, to me, a knife is like a screwdriver. A screwdriver doesn't tell you your hands have to be a certain size to use it. So a knife shouldn't be exclusive to somebody with a certain hand size, right? Here's a smaller knife. The Alliance Designs Ray Laconico EZE, okay? In my hands, it's a 3.5 finger knife, right? But guess what? Simple ergonomics, easy to handle blade, and scales means that this is part of my EDC rotation every single day of the week. When I'm not carrying a Grazioso, or now not carrying the Nazca, this is in my rotation. It stays on my desk for me to grab. Why? Because, like a screwdriver, this is usable. This is absolutely usable, and it does not require any additional concern for me or consideration for how to grip it, how to like manage it, or how to handle it, right? And a good knife should be like that. Screwdriver does not tell you your hands have to be a certain size in order to use it, right? This has been my #1 complaint with GiantMouse. And I mean, I may be able to levy that same concern against this knife, but I'm going to give it a pass because it's the first one that I have been able to use consistently and effectively, and I enjoy it. I really do. From what I know, they changed their OEM for this particular knife from Fox knives, or I think they either work with Fox or they work with some Italian outfit. I'm pretty darn sure they don't work with ManganasSteel, but this was probably the best decision they've made because really, Bestech nailed it with this. I mean, everything down to the finish on the blade feels like quality. I mean, if you set this thing up next to my full-size Synapse, you know, the blade finish is exactly the same. The sensation and quality of the micarta is exactly the same. Actually, I prefer even the color of the micarta on the GiantMouse more than I do on the Vero. But every detail was handled really, really well by Bestech on this. And I hope they continue to OEM with Bestech. And I hope they continue to design knives that are inclusive. Because, like I said, this is the first knife that I've really handled that fits me personally. And it's great. It's great. And I'd like to say that about more of their stuff. You know, genuinely speaking, I'd love to. But they don't always hit that mark. And when they do, oof, this is nice. This is nice. If you've been on the fence and you're thinking about picking one of these up for Christmas, you know, or just as like a gift to yourself, do it, man. This thing is pretty dope. Is pretty dope. I gotta give it to them. So let me know what you think down in the comments. This is a little different video because I've been showing my face the whole time. Normally I don't do that, but I wanted just for you guys to see the emotion on my face, you know, when I kind of explain how I feel about some of this stuff. You know, I feel very, very strongly about ergonomics, and I feel very strongly about how a knife should feel in the hands. I mean, even though it's a big brute of a knife, it's why this guy sticks around. The Hinderer ZT, you know, which one was this one? This is the 0393, the Eclipse collab, man. This thing just beautiful in the hands, really, just super duper comfortable, really well done ergonomics, a tool that you can use. And I can make the argument that not all GiantMouses have been tools that you can use. This one is. I can give that approval to the Nazca. This thing is is a tool that I can and do use a lot.